Chapter 73. By the time Xiao Qing finished packing, it was already dawn. She yawned and prepared to set up her stall. She had harvested too many things in the past 2 days, so it was better to sell them. She would feel more at ease if she exchanged them for zombie nuclei. In addition, she was going to buy some higher-level zombie nuclei. Regardless of whether they came to sell or not, she would still get some. Anyway, she didn't lack food now, and there weren't many people in her family who ate food. She only had Xiao Tong and half a little bun, so she might as well use them to exchange for some nuclei. Xiao Qing first went to find Yan Honqing and asked Yan Honqing to take care of her family. Then, she went to set up her stall. The good spots in the stall had been taken by others. Xiao Qing didn't mind. She found a corner, set up her stall, and began to absorb the crystals and improve her spiritual power. When it was almost noon, Xiao Qing suddenly noticed that someone stopped in front of her stall. Xiao Qing opened her eyes and found that the person squatting in front of her stall was none other than the stupid rich guy she met yesterday. Xiao Qing immediately perked up, and 4 words immediately appeared in her mind: too much money makes people stupid. Thinking of this, her expression immediately became much gentler. Is there anything you need? You can take a look. I have quite a lot of things here. Meng Shen was a little embarrassed by Xiao Qing's gentle look. He flipped through the things in the stall, but his mind was thinking about how to strike up a conversation with Xiao Qing. If he suddenly said that he wanted to get to know her, would it make her think that he was a hooligan? What if Xiao Qing rejected him? What if Xiao Qing thought that he wasn't a good person and was wary of him? Meng Shen thought a lot. His hands unconsciously turned over, and then he felt that he had caught something. He looked down and found that he was holding Xiao Qing's foot. Meng Shen, Xiao Qing. Meng Shen quickly loosened his grip. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I was distracted. Xiao Qing silently withdrew her foot. Her face suddenly changed from gentle to expressionless. Is there anything you like? Meng Shen saw the look on her face that said, if you don't have it, hurry up and leave. He really wanted to apologize, but after thinking for a long time, he picked up something and said, yes. He didn't know why, but when he was in front of Xiao Qing, he was obviously sharp-tongued and knew how to talk, but when he was in front of Xiao Qing, he couldn't wait to spit out word by word. The moment he picked it up, Meng Shen regretted it, because it was an unopened pack of sanitary pads. Xiao Qing's heart collapsed. She had met a pervert. Actually, Meng Shen was here to flirt with her, right? Meng Shen subconsciously loosened his grip, but in the next second, he took the thing back and said in a very sincere tone, I bought it for my friend. Xiao Qing silently stretched out a finger. Meng Shen took out a crystal and gave it to Xiao Qing. Sure enough, in his mind, crystals were like steel bulbs. They were priced at the same time. Xiao Qing, who originally wanted to chase him away, silently restrained herself. However, in her heart, she had already equated Meng Shen with a pervert. Meng Shen picked a few more things that he was really interested in. Then, he tried to chat with Xiao Qing. Your name is Xiao Qing, right? It's a very nice name. Xiao Qing smiled slightly, but in her heart, she thought, damn, he is really a pervert. He actually investigated my name. Meng Shen said again, my name is Meng Shen, not Meng Shen. Meng is Meng, and Shen is Shen. Xiao Qing, who didn't want to know his name, smiled slightly. Meng Shen was a little dispirited. He had lived in the laboratory for a long time. Although his IQ was high, his EQ was extremely low. He was the worst at dealing with people. Seeing that Xiao Qing obviously didn't want to communicate with him, Meng Shen couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. Fortunately, he was a very tenacious person. Soon, he cheered up. I saw your badge. Are you also a psychic? Xiao Qing nodded. I'm a wood psychic. Meng Shen dryly tried to find a topic. What a coincidence. I'm a spirit psychic. Xiao Qing couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. If it was another psychic, she might really not want to talk to Meng Shen. Unfortunately, Meng Shen was a spirit psychic. Xiao Tong was also a spiritual type metahuman, and spiritual-type metahumans were as rare as lightning-type metahumans. Xiao Qing didn't have anything to help Xiao Tong, but now she had met another spiritual-type metahuman. Xiao Qing, who had been cold, immediately became interested. "You're a spirit psychic?" "Yes." Meng Shen smiled slightly. He had relatively few expressions and smiles, but when he smiled, he was particularly good-looking. His whole face glowed with a very attractive brilliance. Especially his slightly curved phoenix eyes. Even Xiao Qing was stunned for a moment. But soon, Meng Shen's smile disappeared, and he returned to his serious and somewhat abstinent appearance. Xiao Qing couldn't help but say, "I have a companion who's also a spirit psychic." What a coincidence. Meng Shen was also interested. There are very few spirit psychics. It's fate to meet one. Spirit psychics aren't easy to grasp and control. It's one of the more difficult types of psychics. I seem to have said a lot of nonsense. No, I like to hear it. Do you have any tricks? Xiao Qing smiled gently. Meng Shen immediately felt that he seemed to have a chance to strike up a conversation with Xiao Qing. He hurriedly revealed the way he practiced his spirit power. "I often use my spirit power to try to pick up some things. At first, I start with small things like bowls and chopsticks. Then I slowly try to pick up bigger things. It's very useful for the growth of spirit power." "Thank you." Xiao Qing wrote it down and returned a smile. Then she got some information about spirit power from Meng Shen. For example, spirit power was very strong, but at the same time, it was also very fragile. Once overdrawn or seriously injured, it was easy to become mentally retarded. Therefore, when spirit psychics were relatively weak, they had to be protected as much as possible. When they grew to a certain level, they would be somewhat safe. If spirit psychics grew up, they would be very scary. They could kill people and zombies without leaving a trace. When she was almost done, Xiao Qing's face changed. "Do you have anything else to buy?" Meng Shen looked at the pile of things in his hand and then looked at the things on the stall. He silently shook his head. Then he heard Xiao Qing say coldly, "Then why don't you leave?" Meng Shen's heart broke at that moment. No matter how much he said, it couldn't change his image in Xiao Qing's mind, a pervert. Chapter 74. Meng Shen went back gloomily. Yan Pingshan had been waiting for him for a long time. When he saw him, he hurriedly asked, "How was it? Did you get anything?" Meng Shen put a pile of things on the ground, then said with a serious face, "Her name is Xiao Qing." And then Yan Pingshan waited for a long time, then saw that Meng Shen was still looking at him with a serious face, but didn't want to continue. Meng Shen pointed at the pile of things on the ground, then sat down to drink water. Yan Pingshan was speechless. "That is to say, you went out and found out her name, and we knew it long ago. Why did you bring back a pile of junk? Tell me, how many crystal stones did you spend?" Yan Pingshan was prepared, but he was still surprised when Meng Shen pointed at him. "What? 5 crystal stones? You spent 5 crystal stones on this pile of junk?" Meng Shen said innocently, "No. I didn't spend 5. Then, when Yan Pingshan let out a sigh of relief, he said calmly, "It's 50. Yan Pingshan sat down on the ground. At that moment, he almost burst into tears. 50 crystal stones. He took the team of paranormals all the way from Zhongbei Survivor Base to S-City Survivor Base. How many crystal stones did he get? 50 crystal stones. What kind of wastrel was this? He couldn't take it out and beat him to death. Could he? You spent 50 crystal stones and found out her name?" Yan Pingshan asked with a trembling voice. Meng Shen looked at Yan Pingshan sitting on the ground, trembling. He couldn't bear it. He thought carefully, then said, "She has a companion who is a psychic paranormal." Yan Pingshan propped himself up from the chair and sat down dispiritedly. "Did you talk about anything else? Like being friends or something?" Meng Shen shook his head, then said with a slightly livelier tone, "I made an appointment with her tomorrow. She didn't refuse. No one would refuse a sucker who came to their door. Yen Pingshan trembled and covered his heart, then said to himself, "Last night, how Yun treated me, why didn't I eat more? At least make up for the loss." Meng Shen didn't listen to Yen Pingshan's nagging. He was thinking about his own plan. "I think if I talk to her a few more times, we should get familiar. I can feel that she is a very cautious girl, but she is a good person. She is a good girl. Why would she cheat you so many crystal stones if she is a good person? Wake up, young man. She just thinks that you're a fool with a lot of money and are easy to trick." However, Yen Pingshan didn't want to discourage Meng Shen. He organized his words, then said, "In that case, you can talk to her tomorrow, but don't bring too many crystal stones tomorrow. Promise me, okay?" Meng Shen nodded, then carried the pile of things into his room. He found a notebook and began to write down the tips of training psychic paranormal. His intuition told him that he could make her like him. Xiao Qing didn't manage to get more than a few high-grade zombie nuclei in one day. After all superpower people needed to absorb zombie nuclei to evolve, and not many of them would be stupid enough to sell their nuclei. However, she sold a lot of things. Coupled with the income provided by Meng Shen, the spendthrift, today was not a bad day. In the afternoon, she packed up and went back early. She and her friends seemed to have formed a tacit understanding that although they lived separately, they would eat together. After all, Yen Hanqing and Xiao Qing's culinary skills weren't bad, much better than Gu Panpan and her sister. Therefore, the two of them would always come over to freeload every meal. Moreover, every time they split the spoils, they would consciously leave behind a portion of the food as their rations and leave it with Xiao Qing. The reward for this mission was very rich. They didn't need to do any missions in a short time. They only needed to rest and cultivate. The more their abilities improved, the safer their next mission would be. Before most of her friends broke through to level 3, Xiao Qing didn't want to go on any big missions. At most, they would take on some simple missions. A moderate amount of fighting was also good for them. However, after the last mission, the higher-ups seemed to value Xiao Qing and the rest more. There was also a level 3 paranormals team called Qi Yen. They found Xiao Qing and wanted to talk to Xiao Qing about merging baby Meng into Qi Yen. They were directly rejected by Xiao Qing. After dinner, Xiao Qing called Xiao Tong over and taught Xiao Tong all the knowledge she learned from Meng Shan in the day. Xiao Tong was mute, but she wasn't stupid. On the contrary, she was actually very smart. It was just that she was injured too much previously, which caused her to be a little slow. After her ability evolved, she was also slowly recovering. After Xiao Qing explained those things to her, she quickly understood and deduced many things from one example. After Xiao Tong obtained a new method to train her mental strength, she didn't stop. She kept using her mental strength to lift this and that. Xiao Tong actually yearned to become stronger. She didn't want to be protected under Xiao Qing's wings. She hoped that she could help Xiao Qing, even if it was just a little. However, Xiao Tong was still relatively weak after all. Soon, her spiritual power was almost exhausted. At this time, she could feel that from the strange crystal hanging around her neck, there was a cool aura slowly entering her body, restoring her spiritual power. On the other side, Xiao Qing also returned to her room. After absorbing the crystal for a while, she suddenly had an idea. Xiao Tong and Meng Shan were both psychic paranormals, so they could lift something with their mental strength. But she also had spiritual power. Didn't this mean that in fact, everyone had the potential to become a psychic? It was just that some people had more spiritual power, while others had less. Those who had more spiritual power had a higher chance of becoming a psychic when they awakened their psychic abilities. If she also trained her mental strength, would she develop a second ability in the future? Xiao Qing was a person who liked to do things immediately. She closed her eyes and meditated for a long time, slowly mobilizing the mental strength that she had spent a long time to feel. Then, she slowly tried to mobilize this mental strength. If Xiao Tong's mental strength was a lake, then hers was only a basin of water. Needless to say, the gap between them was naturally obvious. However, under Xiao Qing's control, the crystal in her hand really slowly floated up. However, it only lasted for a few seconds, and then the crystal fell back into Xiao Qing's palm. Even with Xiao Qing's physique, she felt as if she was covered in cold sweat, and her head was faintly aching like being pricked by needles. This was the feeling of overdrawing one's mental strength. She suddenly felt very sorry for Xiao Tong. Just overdrawing one's mental strength was already so uncomfortable. How painful would it be for Xiao Tong to be injured many times? However, Xiao Qing didn't think too much about it. Because of the overdraft of her mental strength, she lay on the bed and soon fell asleep. Chapter 75. The next day, when Xiao Qing went out to set up her stall, she saw Meng Shen again. He gave Xiao Qing a booklet. Xiao Qing flipped through it and asked, "What's this?" "My experience on spiritual power cultivation." Meng Shen smiled and said, "I organized it into a booklet last night. You can take it back and show it to your companions." "Thank you." Xiao Qing paused for a moment. She didn't know how to react. She originally thought that Meng Shen was a stupid, rich, and strange pervert. However, Meng Shen's behavior made her feel a little embarrassed. "I like your character very much. I want to be friends with you." "You don't have to thank your friends." Meng Shen quickly recalled the booklet Yen Pingshan gave him before he came here. His memory was very good. He memorized that long booklet in a short while. What a strange person. Xiao Qing silently changed the label of Meng Shen from a stupid, rich pervert to a strange pervert. Then, from a strange pervert to a pervert that she could probably get in touch with. Meng Shen said dryly, "There's one more thing. I came from Zhongbei Survivor Base. We're about to return to Zhongbei Survivor Base. I want to invite you. Do you have a team of ability users?" Xiao Qing nodded and said, "My team is just a level 2 ability user team. Moreover, it's just formed not long ago. You'd better think about what you want to invite us to do first. It's like this. Many of the guards who escorted us here were injured along the way. It might be a little difficult for them to escort us back. Therefore, I want to invite your team to escort us back. You can treat it as a mission. I'll pay you according to the usual mission of the same level." Meng Shen said carefully, "I can also pay you half of the reward before the mission. The other half will be paid when we arrive at the destination. How about it?" Xiao Qing didn't agree rashly. Instead, she asked, "Why did you choose our team?" "I believe that you should have investigated in advance. In S-City's Survivor Base, there are many powerful ability user teams. There are even 3 level 3 ability user teams. We're just a newly formed level 2 ability user team. If a normal person were to make a choice, they would choose from the 3 level 3 ability user teams, right?" "You're very cautious." He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, which covered the sharpness of his eyes and softened his aura. "That's right. I did my research beforehand. My initial choice was one of the 3 level 3 ability user teams. Later, you brought your team and the Storm team back. The Storm team was considered one of the more experienced and powerful ability user teams in your base. However, they were almost completely annihilated, and none of you were missing. Don't talk to me about luck. I don't believe in that. In my opinion, even luck is a part of strength. There's more." Xiao Qing looked at Meng Shen calmly. Perhaps it was because Meng Shen had been trying to wash away his bad image in Xiao Qing's mind, but he had failed. What he said just now changed Xiao Qing's impression of him. He was insightful, attentive, observant, and analytical. If he was strong, he would be rational when he needed to be. He would be a good friend. Meng Shen continued, "I have analyzed your operation in detail. It is very difficult to not lose a single person. The requirements for a team leader are also very high. You need to have enough foresight, rationality, decisiveness, and a certain amount of luck. Of course, you must have enough strength and teamwork. I have tried to bring in several top Esper teams from our base, but I found that none of them could guarantee that they could complete the mission without losing a single person. So, I chose you. Is this reason enough?" Meng Shen was very smart. He chose to say 80% of the truth and 20% of the lies. This way, it was much harder to expose than a pure lie. Xiao Qing shook her head. Even if I believe that you are sincerely inviting our team, I can't agree. Why? Meng Shen frowned. We can discuss the reward. As you said before, I have enough foresight, rationality, and decisiveness. It is because of this that I choose to refuse. A wise person should learn to give up appropriately. This mission is very difficult. I can't guarantee that I won't lose any of my teammates because of this mission. This is the main reason why I refuse. Xiao Qing was very calm. My team is different from others. All my teammates are my family and the closest people to me. I can't accept losing even one of them. Meng Shen was anxious. Your thinking is very wrong. Do you want to choose a mission that is not dangerous at all in the future? All the paranormals break through their limits in danger, and then progress little by little. You are protecting them like this, and also preventing them from becoming strong. Xiao Qing didn't explain anything. She just said lightly, I am a very strong person, so I must protect everyone under my wings. You may think that my decision is not good for their future, but I think that I don't need them to be strong and unstoppable. I just want them to live safely and healthily until the end of the world, or until the end of the world. Meng Shen took a deep breath and couldn't help but say, what if one day, even you can't protect them? If there comes a day when I am unable to protect them, it will definitely be because of my death. Before I die, I will make proper arrangements for everyone. If they are about to be humiliated, I will take the first step and kill them. We will die together. Xiao Qing curled her lips and said with a smile that was not a smile. Meng Shen opened his eyes wide. He had never seen someone like Xiao Qing. You are simply unreasonable. Xiao Qing smiled. Thank you for the compliment. Chapter 76. Yan Hanqing walked out of the kitchen with a big pot of chicken soup. He had a complicated look in his eyes. I stewed chicken for Xiao Tong and the others. Do you want to drink some? The chicken soup should be able to absorb the energy. Xiao Qing shook her head. All the food is useless to me. I have to spit it out after drinking it. It's too troublesome. You guys eat. I'll absorb the crystal stone for a while. When Xiao Qing was about to go in to absorb the crystal stone, Dai wanted to follow her. Then, Little Bun grabbed the corner of her clothes. When Xiao Qing closed the door, she saw Little Bun was still scratching Dai. Xiao Qing sighed again. She felt that she had sighed away all the anger in her life in the past 2 days. When she sat down to absorb the crystal stone, Xiao Qing was shocked. She was embarrassed and focused all her attention on the outside world. She didn't realize that she was only 1 step away from level 4. What did she do? How did it rise to almost level 4 in just one night? It was as if she had eaten a miracle pill. She inevitably thought of the discordant things last night. After calming down, Xiao Qing put aside those shameful things and began to think about it. To study this, she had to start from the source. First of all, why did Dai suddenly become like that? Although Dai was different from ordinary zombies, they had their own consciousness and intelligence. However, their bodies were similar to ordinary zombies. At least in that aspect, they were similar. If there wasn't any special reason, why did he suddenly become like that? This wasn't scientific. Xiao Qing thought carefully. She realized that she had only seen one zombie that was different in this aspect. It was the one that humiliated Cheng Jiao and was later cut into cucumber sauce. Thinking of this, Xiao Qing was suddenly enlightened. Because yesterday, she was still puzzled. She clearly remembered that she had an advanced zombie crystal stone, but she couldn't find it. It was very likely that she had given it to Dai by accident. Dai absorbed it without knowing, and that was why last night's incident happened. That was the only possibility. Otherwise, how could Dai suddenly become like that? Then what happened next was easy to deduce. It was very likely that this crystal caused some kind of mutation in Dai, and then he became like that. After she and Dai did that kind of thing, the energy of the crystal went through some kind of transformation, and a part of it entered her body. That zombie should be level 4, which meant that she and Dai shared a level 4 zombie crystal and some unspeakable energy, which led her to almost reach level 4. This was the most likely possibility. No matter what had happened was in the past. People had to look forward. At least the increase in strength now was a consolation. Xiao Qing used up a lot of energy last night, and it was time for her to replenish her energy. She took out the remaining level 4 zombie crystal stone, and then began to absorb it. Probably because she used up too much energy last night, when Xiao Qing woke up, the level 4 zombie crystal was almost completely absorbed by her. Xiao Qing could also clearly feel that she was just a little bit away from breaking through. She decided to break through in one go. Soon, the level 4 zombie crystal was completely absorbed by her. Then, Xiao Qing took out a few level 3 zombie crystals, and absorbed them all in one go. The energy converged into a flood in her body. Xiao Qing tried to use the method that Meng Shen taught her. She used her spiritual power to guide the energy into the nucleus in her brain. Boom! At that moment, Xiao Qing felt that her mind was like an explosion of fireworks, and then it went blank. After a long time of calmness, Xiao Qing woke up. Chapter 77. Xiao Qing could clearly feel the energy full of vitality flowing out of her crystal nucleus, rushing to her limbs and bones. Wherever the energy passed, her meridians, blood vessels, and muscles seemed to be recovering. At that moment, Xiao Qing firmly believed that as long as she kept leveling up, her body would become like a normal human one day. This was not the thing that made her happiest. What made her happiest was that little Bun would have a chance to become a normal person in the future. Wasn't this what she had been pursuing? After calming down, Xiao Qing went out. It was almost afternoon, but Gu Pan Pan and the others were sitting on the sofa. As soon as they saw Xiao Qing come out, Dai came over, followed by Gu Pan Pan. "Sister, you finally came out. What's wrong?" Xiao Qing tore Dai off her body. Although Dai used to like to stick to her, Xiao Qing didn't feel guilty at that time. Now that something really happened, Xiao Qing felt guilty. As soon as Dai stuck to her, she tore it off. Dai felt very wronged, but she didn't dare to say anything. Gu Pan Pan didn't care about this little detail. She just said, "It's like this. Just now, the base sent someone over, saying that they want our team to represent the S-City Survivor Base and escort those people from Jiangbei Survivor Base back." Xiao Qing couldn't help but frown. First, it was Meng Shen, and now it was Yen Pingshan. They couldn't persuade her, but now they wanted to use force? "Did you tell the base that we don't intend to do any missions recently?" Gu Pan Pan said, "I told you. When we thought about it, we felt that something wasn't right. There are so many teams of ability users in the base, so why did they pick us?" I politely refused. Then that person said that this mission was mandatory and that we had to complete it. However, the reward for the mission was also very generous. Xiao Qing was a little angry. She didn't know what kind of conspiracy Meng Shan and the others had in mind when they tried to force them to take this mission, but it was definitely not a good thing. She wouldn't have stepped into this kind of trap, but someone forced her to step into it. Who would be happy? Did they say anything else? Xiao Qing asked coldly. They did. They said that we're representing the base and that we should be friendly to them along the way, and show them the strength of our base appropriately. They said that they'll pay us half of the reward first, and then give us the other half after we send them over. Gu Pan Pan huffed. Who cares about their reward? Xiao Qing also had a headache. She sat down and told Gu Pan Pan and the others what had happened before. Finally, she concluded, we still want to live in this base, so we can't offend the base. So we have to take this mission. But there is definitely a conspiracy behind it. Everyone should be careful when the time comes. I hope nothing bad will happen. While the entire team of mutants was on high alert, Yen Pingxing was a little drunk. He reclined on the chair and grumbled to Meng Shen. That Hao Yun is so greedy. He might have already noticed that we've designated Baby Meng as the mutant team. He'll definitely send a second team to keep an eye on us. We'll have to depend on you then. Meng Shen was expressionless. Why rely on me? Aren't you close to that? Xiao Qing? I saw you lying there in the middle of the night writing love letters to her. You didn't want to do it when I asked you to. Yan Pingxing rolled his eyes and didn't care about his image at all. Actually, you must be very happy deep down. Widows and whatnot are the most interesting things. I always thought that you were frigid, but now I know that you're actually horny on the inside. Chapter 78. Get Lost. Meng Shen glared at Yan Pingxin coldly. He didn't explain what he had stayed up all night to write. When he thought of this, he felt a little sad. He had written until midnight before his expression looked slightly better. Yan Pingxin muttered a few more words before saying, "You're lying. I'm going to sleep first." Meng Shen tugged at his collar. He couldn't help but think of Xiao Qing. She was the most unique woman he had ever seen. The next day, Yan Pingxin went directly to Xiao Qing's place to discuss the upcoming mission. When he arrived, it happened to be dinner time at Xiao Qing's place. Yan Hanqing had just finished cooking, and Gu Panpan and the others were walking out of the kitchen, each carrying a plate. A rich aroma wafted through the air. Yan Pingxing's nose twitched, and his eyes were glued to the dishes on the table. They seemed delicious. I just finished cooking. Do you want to eat together? Xiao Qing smiled slightly and said politely. Yan Pingxin felt that he should decline first to show that he was reserved. Then, when Xiao Qing invited him again, he could pretend that he reluctantly agreed because of Xiao Qing's hospitality. That would make him look more dignified. Thus, Yan Pingxin waved his hand and said, "How can I accept that? I've already eaten. You guys can eat." Xiao Qing nodded and said, "Then we'll eat first. I'll go get you a glass of water." Yan Pingxin was speechless. This wasn't the script. He looked at the plain water in front of him and then at the family eating happily. If he could turn back time, Yan Pingxin would definitely go back to just a moment ago and then shamelessly say, "That's great. It just so happens that I haven't eaten either." This was probably what it meant to be unsuccessfully pretentious. While Yan Hanqing and the others were eating, Xiao Qing walked over to Yan Pingxin with a glass of water. "May I know what brings you here?" Yan Pingxin collected his thoughts and said seriously, "Of course, I want to talk to you about the next escort mission. I have to apologize to you first. I mentioned to S-City Base that we were short of manpower and wanted to borrow some people from S-City Survivor Base. Then, I mentioned you guys by the way. I didn't talk to you in advance and rashly proposed to choose you guys. It's my fault. Please forgive me." Xiao Qing's heart was naturally full of anger, but she couldn't show it on the surface. That was why she deliberately made Yan Pingxin suffer in these small matters. She said lightly, "It's our honor to have you take a fancy to our team. I don't know when we will set off, and what kind of mission will we have. We will start the return journey tomorrow afternoon. You don't need to do too much. Just protect us along the way." Yan Pingxin quickly took out a small bag and poured the things inside on the table. "This is the promised reward. I will send the other part in the afternoon." On the table were the 10 level 3 zombie nuclei that Yan Pingxin had promised before. These nuclei were placed on the table, which slightly reduced Xiao Qing's anger. She glanced at them and nodded. "Will we meet at the square tomorrow afternoon? We will be there on time." "Yes, 1 o'clock. Yan Pingxin forced himself not to look at the table, but the smell of the food seemed to be against him, constantly drilling into his nose. Yan Hanqing's cooking was not for show. The smell made Yan Pingxin's mouth almost drool, but he had to pretend to be calm. "Is there anything else?" Xiao Qing's meaning was very clear. If there was nothing else, he should leave. Don't delay their meal. Chapter 79. Hearing that, Yan Pingxin didn't want to stay any longer, so he got up and said, "I don't have anything else to say. I'll go back now. I won't disturb you guys from eating." Xiao Qing didn't even want to see him off. She just watched him leave alone. After Yen Pingshan left, Xiao Qing picked up the zombie nuclei one by one and checked them with her weak spirit power. Every zombie nucleus was full of energy, so it wasn't fake. Everyone, hurry up and eat. Once we're done, I'll divide these zombie crystal nuclei. Let's work hard tonight, and try to have a few level 3 superpowered people by tomorrow's mission, Xiao Qing said while checking if there were any zombie crystal nuclei that had undergone special evolution. The few people over there finished their meal in silence. Then, Yen Hanqing was responsible for cleaning up the dishes and the others sat over. Now, Gu Panpan and Gu Chuan were both at the peak of level 2. They were only one step away from level 3. After absorbing level 3 zombie nuclei, the possibility of them breaking through was very high. Although Yen Hanqing got his superpower late, he had also reached level 2. He was only a little bit weaker than Gu Chuan and his sister, so the possibility of him breaking through was also very high. Dumbo 2. Ahem, after experiencing the relatively peaceful thing last night, he was now at level 3. Xiao Tong's superpower was the rarest. She was also the weakest one among them. In addition, spirit power didn't evolve purely by absorbing energy, so the possibility of her breaking through was slightly smaller. Even Little Bun had reached level 2 with the support of snacks every day and night. However, Little Bun didn't have any attack power, so his fighting power was almost negligible. After thinking about it, Xiao Qing gave Air Dai a level 3 zombie nucleus to consolidate his realm after absorbing it. Then she gave Gu Panpan 2. Gu Panpan was a superpowered person with strength and body, so it was easy for her to evolve. 2 nuclei should be enough for her to reach level 3. He then gave Xiao Tong another piece and told her to absorb it and accumulate energy. If Xiao Tong wanted to break through, the key was still the strange crystal core hanging around her neck. Gu Chuan and Yen Hanqing each got 3 nuclei. Xiao Qing told them not to save any crystals. Zombie nuclei were meant to be absorbed. She told them to be sure to reach level 3 before tomorrow. This way, when everyone went out on a mission together, they would be more secure. 10 crystals were distributed like this. Then the group was driven away by Xiao Qing for closed-door training. After they all left, Little Bun crawled up to Xiao Qing's lap. He stared at Xiao Qing with his big round eyes and asked, "Is Dai Dai my new daddy?" Xiao Qing almost couldn't hold it in and stood up from the sofa. She choked and stared with her eyes wide open. "Baby, what did you say?" Little Bun hugged Xiao Qing's waist with grievance and whispered, "Mama's whole body is full of Dai Dai's smell. Mama also sleeps with Dai Dai." Xiao Qing's face was as red as a monkey's butt. Being told by her own son like this was simply shameful play. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. Little Bun lay in Xiao Qing's arms and stuck out his little butt. He said with a sobbing voice, "The book said that if there is a stepfather, there will be a stepmother. Then Mama will give birth to a baby and don't want me anymore. Is it true?" Xiao Qing immediately felt distressed. She picked up Little Bun and kissed his face. "Baby, I won't have a second baby in my life. You are my one and only. I don't want anyone but you." The Little Bun pouted and reached out to wrap his arms around Xiao Qing's neck, whispering, "But Mama doesn't like Bao Bao anymore. Mama is so busy and doesn't sleep with Bao Bao anymore. I sleep with Tong Tong and play with Tong Tong. Mama doesn't talk to me much either." Chapter 80. From afar, she saw some familiar faces there. These familiar faces were none other than the Blazing Flame ability user team that wanted to merge Baby Meng into their ability user team back then. In the base, Jian ranked slightly higher than Fierce Wind, especially after Fierce Wind lost 6 or 7 members. Jian's captain was a fire paranormal, so the name of the paranormal team was based on the captain's special ability. Qi Yan was also the only 3rd-level ability user team with a female captain. Qi Yan's captain was called Yen Ru. Back then, she had taken a fancy to Xiao Qing's ability and wanted to merge Baby Meng into their team. When the two teams stood together, the style was especially different. Everyone on Yen Ruru's team was fully equipped with weapons, looking especially stylish. On Xiao Qing's side, the captain was carrying the child, and there were 2 others who looked underage. Yan Hanqing was also carrying a bottle of soy sauce that he bought when he passed by the market. At first glance, it exuded a strong rustic aura. It was very down-to-earth. Anyway, the style of the 2 teams was completely different. Yen Ruru and Cheng Jiao were somewhat similar. The difference was that Yen Ruru was more imposing, and it was obvious that she had a fiery temper. Yen Ruru couldn't help but twitch her mouth. "Why did you bring the child out?" Xiao Qing scratched Little Bun's chin. "Call me auntie." Little Bun blinked his big eyes and gave a cute smile to Yen Ruru. "Hello, auntie." Yen Ruru's handsome face softened. "So obedient," Xiao Qing said very seriously. "I don't feel at ease leaving my son anywhere, so it's better to bring him along." Yen Ruru lowered her voice and said, "But it's so dangerous outside. Why don't you hire someone to take care of him? There are many missions for ordinary people in the mission hall. If you're worried, I can introduce you to 2 more reliable ones." Xiao Qing shook her head. "It's a little dangerous, but I'm not worried. If he's not in front of me, I won't feel at ease doing missions outside. More importantly, if I die, there will be no one to take care of him in the future. It's better for him to stay by my side and live and die together." Yen Ruru patted Xiao Qing's shoulder and didn't say anything else. She just said, "Don't affect the team." Xiao Qing nodded. At this time, Yen Pingshan's people came over. Yen Pingshan had mutants too, but some of them were injured on the way here and hadn't recovered yet. This was one of the reasons why they needed a team of mutants. "2 captains, nice to meet you." Yen Pingshan smiled and reached out his hand to shake hands with Xiao Qing and Yen Ruru. He was very gentlemanly when he was serious. Meng Shen also came over and shook hands with Xiao Qing. He slightly raised the corner of his mouth, and the curve of his smile was almost non-existent. "I'm very happy that you agreed." Xiao Qing wanted to complain. If it weren't for the mandatory mission of the base, she would never have agreed to this mission. It was such a long road from S-City to Zhongbei Survivor Base. No one knew what would happen along the way. The danger and unpredictability were too high. Although she was disgusted, Xiao Qing's expression didn't change. She shook hands with Meng Shen. Then the captain of the mutant team in Zhongbei Survivor Base came over and asked, "When are we leaving?" The captain of the mutant team in Zhongbei was the only male captain of the 3 mutant teams. He looked very steady, so he should be a reliable person. "We're leaving right away." Yen Pingshan waved his hand and then asked Xiao Qing with a smile, "Captain Xiao, do you want to take our car? We can also catch up." Chapter 81. The corner of Xiao Qing's mouth twitched, and she decisively refused. "Who wants to talk about old times with you?" Yen Pingshan expressed his regret, but he didn't stop her. He knew that forcing Xiao Qing's team to carry out this mission had already made Xiao Qing very unhappy. Now was the time to increase her favorability. If he continued to pester her, her favorability would probably be infinitely negative. The first to leave the base was the Blaze Paranormal Team's vehicle, followed by the people from Zhongbei Survivor Base, and finally Xiao Qing's team. There were many vehicles transporting supplies in the Zhongbei Survivor Base. They were all covered with large tarpaulins, so they couldn't see what was inside. However, it was easy to understand that they must be trading goods with S-City's Survivor Base. Zhongbei Survivor Base was a little bigger than S-City's Survivor Base in terms of size, and the number of people inside was also a little more. Moreover, Zhongbei Survivor Base was backed by a very long and wide river. The zombies on the other side of the river couldn't cross over, so it was a little safer than S-City's Survivor Base in terms of safety. However, after the apocalypse, the climate there was worse than here, so it was very difficult to grow vegetables in season. In this area, Zhongbei Survivor Base was inferior to S-City's Survivor Base. When it was time for lunch, although they gathered together, they ate separately. Everyone started to cook. They simply cooked a pot of dry food, while Xiao Qing's team had already divided the work of cooking and cooking. In fact, they didn't cook any complicated dishes. They just brought some cold rice, fried it with eggs and vegetables, and then steamed it. However, nothing was afraid of comparison. The moment Yen Pingshan smelled the aroma, he raised his head and looked at Xiao Qing's side. Golden eggs wrapped in rice, green vegetables, and thin slices of bacon. Then he looked at his own side. A pot of dry food was cooked like dog food, and there were small salted vegetables on the side. This was today's lunch. The gap between them shouldn't be too big. While Yen Pingshan was hesitating, Yen Ruru had already moved quickly to sit beside Xiao Qing and began to curry favor with her. Do you always bring such rich ingredients when you go out? Children can't lack nutrition. Xiao Qing smiled and filled a bowl for Yen Ruru. She had a good impression of Yen Ruru. Yen Ruru was not pretentious. She took it and thanked her. Yen Pingshan immediately bit his chopsticks and fell into a cycle of sobbing. He also wanted to eat. Sob, sob, sob. Why was the difference in treatment so big? Sob, sob, sob. If he went over now, would he be able to get a bowl? Sob, sob, sob. If Xiao Qing didn't give it to him, would it be embarrassing? Sob, sob, sob. When he finished crying, he found that Meng Shen had already sat down. Meng Shen was very direct. Can you give me a bowl? A small bowl is fine. Since Meng Shen had spoken, and he had helped Xiao Qing would naturally give him face, so she also filled a bowl for him. Fortunately, she made a little more, or it would not be enough. Yen Pingshan did not cry. He ran over with the bowl and looked at Xiao Qing with shining eyes. I also want to eat. Xiao Qing was particularly rude to Yen Pingshan. Yen Pingshan did not help her, and he was the culprit who caused her to have to go on a mission. Why should she be nice to him? Xiao Qing calmly distributed all the rice in the pot to Meng Shen and the others evenly. Everyone's bowl was piled up with a tip. After doing all this, Xiao Qing showed the empty pot to Yen Pingshan. Look, there's no more. Yen Pingshan held an empty bowl and felt particularly miserable. Especially when he saw Yen Ruru and Meng Shen holding the bowls and looking at him with mocking eyes while eating. Yen Pingshan was particularly sad. Putting aside Yen Ruru, he and Meng Shen were in the same group. Why was the treatment different? Chapter 82. Was it because Meng Shen had spent the entire night writing love letters? Was it too late for him to write them now? Xiao Qing couldn't bear to see Yen Pingshan's miserable state. She said softly, Do you want my bowl? Yen Pingshan couldn't take away a girl's lunch. He swallowed a mouthful of blood and said softly, No, I'm already full. No, I want to eat, I don't want to eat that pot of dog food. Oh. Xiao Qing gave him a knowing look. Then, she passed the bowl to Meng Shen. If he doesn't want to eat it, you can eat it. I'm full anyway. Meng Shen quickly put the rice in the bowl into his own bowl. Then, he smiled at Xiao Qing. Thank you. Yen Pingshan immediately knelt down. Xiao Qing was definitely targeting him. Definitely. Yen Pingshan felt very wronged, especially when he was compared to Meng Shen. He sat back in his seat and looked at the dog food in the pot. Then, he looked at Meng Shen, who was so happy that he almost buried his face in the bowl. He felt even more unbalanced. Brother Yen. Fatty, who was cooking, scooped a bowl of rice for Yen Pingshan and paired it with a small green pickled cucumber. He looked at him with pity and said, Eat first. If there was no comparison, it wouldn't hurt. After all, they usually ate this kind of dry food when they went out. However, the comparison was right in front of him. Yen Pingshan really couldn't eat. Every time he took a bite, he felt a little more tears in his heart. Compared to Meng Shen, who liked to speak ill of him, Xiao Qing was really more ruthless. While eating, he thought fiercely, Meng Shen and Xiao Qing are really a match made in heaven. After eating, they took a short rest and continued to move forward. Before nightfall, they had to pass through the empty town in front of them. There were no people in these towns. They were all zombies. If they were still in the town before nightfall, it was very likely that they would be attacked at night. It was very troublesome. After passing the town, there were no zombies in the short distance, so it was relatively safe. These experiences were slowly accumulated after the apocalypse. People had sacrificed a lot of blood and lives. Every experience could save a life. The road ahead is blocked. While walking, the leader of the blazing team sent a message. The team could only stop where they were. Xiao Qing asked her friends to look after the car, and then walked over with the clingy air Dai and Xiao Bao. Yan Pingshan and the others were already waiting there. They didn't know why, but there were big cracks in the ground. It was probably because of the earthquake. Each crack was 5 or 6 meters wide, and the narrower ones were more than a meter. The vehicles certainly couldn't pass through. Yan Pingshan and the others' faces couldn't help but become ugly. When they came here, the road was pretty good. They didn't expect that it would become like this when they went back. More importantly, this was the safest road. No matter which way they went, it was inevitable that they would pass through a lot of zombies. The loss of people was certain. What should we do? Yen Ruru also frowned. Should we take a detour? She looked at the length of the cracks. It was impossible to go through from the edge. We can't take a detour. Yen Pingshan clenched his teeth. If we take a detour from the left, we will be on the highway. There are a lot of abandoned vehicles on the highway. Even if we ignore the zombies, it will be very troublesome to go forward. If we take a detour from the highway, we will be in the city. It is too dangerous to go through the city. If we take a detour from the right, it will be a wetland. It is very likely that there will be swamps and a lot of mutant plants. There will be no way to get through it. Yen Ruru couldn't help but say, but we can't go through it. If we don't take a detour, how can the vehicles pass through this huge crack? Not to mention the vehicles, even if we abandon the vehicles, it will be difficult to go through. Meng Shan squatted on the ground to check. The crack was very deep, so deep that he couldn't see the bottom. He took a stone and threw it down. There was the sound of the stone hitting the ground, but there was no sound of the stone falling. It was impossible to fill the crack, so they had to think of another way. Maybe we can let the Earth ability users create a road. Meng Shan thought for a long time and then said, "How do we create it?" Yen Pingshan's eyes lit up, and then he said. Meng Shan said seriously, "This section is at most 100 meters wide, and there is solid ground in the middle. We only need to build a road above the crack like a bridge, to support the vehicles." Yen Pingshan and Yen Ruru also thought that this method was feasible, so they each called 2 Earth ability users. They called the Earth ability users with the highest level in their respective teams, one at the peak of level 3, and one at the peak of level 2. Yen Pingshan told them about Meng Shan's idea, and then said, "Can you build a bridge? It is about 2 meters wide, and it doesn't need to be very thick, as long as our vehicles can pass through it." "We can try." One of the Earth ability users squatted down, put his palms on the ground, and urged his ability. Soon, the rolling soil seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand, and a 2-meter-wide bridge was formed, crossing the crack. Yen Pingshan was very surprised and hurriedly said, "Call a car to try first. Wind ability users, get ready. If the bridge collapses, please hold the car with all your strength, and then the strength ability users will be responsible for dragging the car up." As soon as Yen Pingshan gave the order, people on both sides immediately got busy. When everyone was ready, the off-road vehicle with high hopes slowly drove onto the bridge. Under everyone's nervous gaze, the car crossed the bridge and then reversed back, and the earthen bridge did not collapse. Everyone couldn't help cheering, but Yen Pingshan saw Xiao Qing, who hadn't said a word from beginning to end. She frowned and looked dignified. Yen Pingshan couldn't help but stimulate her. "Captain Xiao, do you think there is any problem?" Xiao Qing pointed at the cracks in front of them and asked the 2 Earth-attributed superpowered men, "Build a bridge all the way across and maintain it until all the off-road vehicles have passed through. Can you 2 do it?" The scene suddenly became cold, including Yen Pingshan's heart. They seemed to have forgotten that the abilities of the ability users were limited, and when they ran out, they would run out. Chapter 83. The two paranormals looked at each other in silence. They couldn't do it. Let alone the two of them, even if all the Earth paranormals on the scene were pulled out, they still wouldn't be able to do it. Do you want us to go through one by one? After sending one car with all our strength, you guys can rest for a day and a half before sending the second car? Xiao Qing said lightly. Yan Pingshan was silent for a long time, then he asked Xiao Qing, do you have any other ideas? Xiao Qing shook her head. Apart from taking a detour, building a bridge is the only way. Isn't that still nonsense? Building a bridge is the only way. They can't support all the cars. It's still a dead end. Yan Pingshan said with some annoyance. Xiao Qing didn't say anything. She looked at the long crack and suddenly asked, how much loss will there be if we take a detour? Meng Shan said sincerely, about 1/3 of the people will be left behind. They won't be able to reach the Zhongbei survivor base. This is just a rough estimate. It doesn't count as an accident. Xiao Qing hesitated for a short time, then she called Gu Chuan over, build an ice bridge. It doesn't need to be too thick. It's enough to cross the crack. It's about 2 meters wide. It's thick enough to support a fully loaded car. Gu Chuan silently stretched out his hand. The moisture in the air was quickly extracted, and an ice bridge appeared above the crack. Xiao Qing tested the thickness, then said, let's try again. Yan Pingshan called the car and tried again. The car went on the bridge, and there was no sign of the ice bridge below cracking. Yan Pingshan's eyes immediately lit up. After the two Earth paranormals built the ice bridge, their faces became much paler. Gu Chuan, on the other hand, looked very calm. The difference between the two sides was obvious. Can you hold on until all the cracks are covered? Yan Pingshan couldn't help but ask. Gu Chuan shook his head. If he was a 4th-level ice paranormal, he could definitely do it, but he was only a 3rd-level paranormal. Yan Pingshan was a little disappointed, but Xiao Qing ignored him. She just asked Gu Chuan, can you reach 2/3 of the crack? Gu Chuan nodded. He could reach that part of the crack, but he would be tired. That's good. Xiao Qing nodded and said to Yan Pingshan, Gu Chuan and me. You guys get ready to cross the bridge. But Yan Pingshan couldn't help but want to ask. Wasn't Gu Chuan unable to hold on? Then he saw that Gu Chuan had already built the ice bridge. While Gu Chuan was building the ice bridge, the other two Earth paranormals didn't stay idle. Xiao Qing asked them to build a thin layer of ice bridge. Then Gu Chuan froze this layer of ice bridge, and then thickened it. This saved him a lot of energy. Seeing that Gu Chuan and the others had already started, Yan Pingshan also ordered everyone to get in the cars and drive them one by one in an orderly manner. Xiao Qing and Gu Chuan were in the front. Every time a layer of ice bridge was laid, Xiao Qing would press it to test it, and then continue to lay it down. After about 50 meters, several Earth paranormals had already taken turns to lay down the ice bridge. Their energy had already been exhausted. Gu Chuan had to do it himself, and completely built the ice bridge. At this time, the strength of a level 3 paranormals could be seen. His face was a little pale, but he didn't look like he had consumed a lot of energy. Can you still hold on? Xiao Qing tried, and now the ice bridge was obviously thinner than before. This wasn't because Gu Chuan was lazy, but because his energy was slowly being exhausted, and he didn't have the strength to continue. It's barely the position you mentioned. Gu Chuan was very calm, but cold sweat was already seeping out of his forehead. Chapter 84. Just tell me when you're at your limit. Don't force yourself. Xiao Qing patted him on the shoulder and looked forward. There were only a few dozen meters left before they crossed the crevice. Gu Chuan nodded, but he still held on until his superpower was exhausted. Then, he sat down on the ground. Yan Pingshan became anxious when he stopped. The whole team was still on the ice, but Gu Chuan could no longer hold on. By the time Gu Chuan recovered, the ice bridge had already melted, and the whole team had fallen into the crevice. Before Yan Pingshan could ask, he saw Xiao Qing help Gu Chuan up. Then she stretched out her right hand, and countless vines flew out. The vines were very flexible. They weaved themselves into the shape of a carpet in midair. Then, everyone saw a scene that made their jaws drop. The carpet, made of vines, fell down. Many tentacle-like vines stretched out from both ends, and like chopsticks piercing into tofu, they easily pierced into the soil on both sides of the crevice. When they tightened, they turned into a green bridge. Everyone was shocked. Most of them couldn't believe it. How could vines support such heavy off-road vehicles? Especially the off-road vehicles in the middle. They were all full of things. Xiao Qing had already helped Gu Chuan move forward. Yan Pingshan gritted his teeth and ordered, "Go forward." They couldn't stop halfway. The driver drove forward with trepidation. To everyone's surprise, the vines were very tough. Walking on them was like walking on solid ground. Only a slight dent under the tires told them that the vines were soft. After Xiao Qing walked past all the cracks, she turned around and saw the sunlight refracted by the ice and patches of tender green. She heaved a sigh of relief and helped Gu Chuan sit down. If there was a second choice, Xiao Qing definitely wouldn't let Gu Chuan do it. First, it would be too tiring. Second, it would expose their strength. The taboo thing for people was to be completely seen through by others. Xiao Qing was worried about that. However, compared to the huge loss of manpower and uncertainties, exposing one's strength was nothing. When all the cars passed through the crevice, Xiao Qing waved her hand gently. The vines turned into wood energy and returned to her body. This was the difference between her and other superpowered people. Other people's superpowers were used, but she could take them back. Although it was inevitable that she would consume some of her power during the process, compared to other people, she would consume less. This small difference might save her life in some life-or-death situations. Yan Pingshan had mixed feelings. When he and Meng Shan went to persuade Xiao Qing, they mentioned many times that they were interested in the strength of Xiao Qing's team. However, in fact, Yan Pingshan didn't care much about that. After all, he had seen the top superpowered people in the base, so his vision was much higher. In his opinion, Xiao Qing's team was at most a little stronger than other teams. The fact was that Gu Chuan's strength was already around level 3. Then, what about Xiao Qing, the team leader? What about the other members of her team? He seemed to have underestimated this superpowered team with a very strange name. Xiao Qing didn't say much. She helped Gu Chuan back to the car. After getting in, Xiao Qing asked Gu Chuan to go to the back seat to absorb the crystals. She sat in the front passenger seat with little Bun in her arms and continued to study the route. Yan Pingshan and the others had studied the route long ago. They knew which path to take was the least dangerous, which path to take was the shortest, and which path to take was the smoothest. However, Xiao Qing was a cautious person. She wasn't in the state where she could feed herself and her family. She had to keep a high level of vigilance. Chapter 85. Take this trip as an example. It was the safest route, but there was still an accident. Xiao Qing took the map and studied it carefully. If there was another accident, she could quickly find a second way out. She wouldn't be as helpless as she was this time. When they stopped for lunch in the afternoon, everyone's attitude towards Xiao Qing and the others was much better. After all, the strong always won more respect. After the meal, there was nothing much to do. It was not suitable to travel at night, but not many people could fall asleep so early in the morning. Therefore, at this time, it was usually time to chat, play cards, and communicate. Gu Chuan and the others were playing cards. Xiao Qing did not join them. She held little Bun and chatted with Yen Ruru. As usual, there was an air Dai by her side. Since that incident, air Dai was particularly clingy. Even when it was free, it liked to sit beside her and look at her. Yen Ruru also had children at home. Unlike Xiao Qing, her husband loved her very much. Moreover, he was an ordinary person. It was not suitable for him to go out and do missions. Therefore, her family's model was that her husband took care of the children, and she went out to work. Naturally, The two mothers had a lot to talk about, especially about raising children. Although they were like chickens and ducks, they talked about different things. For example, Yen Ruru liked to talk about how much her baby ate for a meal, how he got fat again, and how he didn't like to sleep and was very noisy. Every time she came home, he would pester her to tell her stories. Xiao Qing liked to talk about how her little bun could eat a lot, but he didn't get fat or grow taller. He didn't like to sleep, but he didn't make trouble. Every night, he would pester her to sleep with him. Yen Ruru began to praise Little Bun, and Xiao Qing began to sigh. She was very annoyed that Little Bun didn't grow up. Gu Pan Pan, who was closer to them, had already made 3 mistakes. She wanted to laugh as she listened to their conversation. Even though the two of them were talking about similar things, they were still completely different from each other. If Yen Ruru understood Xiao Qing's meaning, she would probably be scared to death. How could a child from a normal family only eat crystals and not grow up? While Xiao Qing and Yen Ruru were chatting happily, Meng Shen was pushed over by Yen Pingshan. Meng Shen staggered and sat beside Xiao Qing, then asked, "What are you talking about?" "You look very happy." Xiao Qing said calmly, "We're talking about our son." Meng Shen fell silent. He had prepared a lot of things to say and thought about what Xiao Qing might be talking about. He even thought about how to perfectly follow up with the conversation. In the end, he realized that Xiao Qing was talking about children. Firstly, he didn't have children. Secondly, he didn't have any experience in taking care of children. Thirdly, he didn't have much contact with children. He realized that he couldn't get a word in. More importantly, there was an air dye next to them. As soon as Meng Shen got a little closer to Xiao Qing, the air dye would stare at Meng Shen like a dog protecting its food. It would quietly push Meng Shen when there was an opportunity. Meng Shen felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He couldn't get a word in, so he sat in silence for a long time. In the end, he left pitifully. After he left, Yen Ruru laughed in a low voice. "He's interested in you. The way he looks at you is quite complicated. And the one next to you?" Xiao Qing slapped the air dye and sighed. She rubbed the air dye's head and said, "He doesn't know anything. His feelings for me are probably just like how a baby bird feels for its mother." As for Meng Shen, Xiao Qing smiled and didn't say anything. She had already determined that Meng Shen wanted something from her. That was why he kept getting close to her. He didn't have any personal feelings for her. Xiao Qing had once thought about finding a father for Little Bun. At least, Little Bun could have a complete family and a more complete childhood. Her first thought was Yen Honqing. Chapter 86. First, they were both soldiers, so they were more harmonious in certain aspects. Second, Yen Honqing's character was more or less understood after this period of time. He was a trustworthy person. Third, Yen Honqing would not treat Little Bun badly, and would be absolutely loyal to her. In the end, something unspeakable happened between her and Air Dai. Air Dai was never a good match in her heart, not because he was a zombie, but because Air Dai really did not know anything. Now Air Dai's feelings for her might be dependence or affection, but it would not be love, because he did not even have his own consciousness, only the most basic instincts. Air Dai like this could be a friend or a partner, but he was not suitable to be a lover. But fate made fools of people, and in the end, she and Air Dai did the most intimate thing. Not necessarily. Yen Ruru glanced at Air Dai. She had already classified Air Dai as someone who had a problem with his brain. To put it bluntly, he was an idiot. Yen Ruru said to Xiao Qing in an experienced tone, "Although he is stupid, his eyes are especially focused. Have you ever seen that, even if there are many people sitting next to him, there is no one else in his eyes except for you? It can be said that he only has you in his world. I think that the person who can be treated like this by him will be very happy." Xiao Qing was stunned, and then she heard Yen Ruru say, "You should not deny his ability to be a lover because of some of his problems. Maybe you can try to understand and accept. At least in my opinion, he is sincere to you. In fact, it is good for you to be like this with him. At least he can't leave you, and he will not betray you. Shao Qing forced a smile. You are very experienced. Let's not talk about this. It is quite late now, and it is time to sleep. Let's talk another day. Okay. Yen Ruru patted her butt and walked lazily to her tent. I'll talk to you another day. Shao Qing carried Little Bun and turned around to see Dai sitting behind her, looking at her intently. She couldn't help but think about Yen Ruru's words. You're the only one in his eyes. You're his entire world. Wasn't this a kind of bone-deep romance? Shao Qing couldn't accept Dai immediately, but Shao Qing's attitude towards Dai had changed a lot. At least, she didn't treat her like a spoiled child anymore. Shao Qing felt that when Dummy's level slowly increased in the future and his IQ recovered, his memory of his life might slowly awaken. If Dummy could say that he loved her at that time, then she would consider being with him. Even if she accepted Dai into her and Little Bun's life, it would be an Dai with a healthy mind and intelligence, and not an Dai like he was now. Shao Qing brought Little Bun into the tent, and Dai followed. Shao Qing was about to take off her coat when she saw Dai crawl under the blanket. Dai noticed Shao Qing looking at him, so he lifted the blanket and patted it, indicating that he would warm the blanket for Shao Qing and let Shao Qing sleep in his arms. Shao Qing was speechless. Ever since that incident, Dummy's attitude towards Shao Qing had changed a lot. He looked at Shao Qing as if he was looking at his own wife. He was especially happy, and in his joy, there was doting, and in his doting, there was also shyness. Dai was then kicked out. He persistently tried to crawl into the tent, but was kicked out again and again. Dai shamelessly tried to crawl into Shao Qing's bed no matter what. After failing multiple times, he pitifully changed his target to crawling into the tent. He even hid in a corner so Shao Qing couldn't kick him. Chapter 87. Shao Qing let him off the hook and let him curl up in the corner, hugging his knees and curling up into a ball. He looked particularly miserable and pitiful. Shao Qing hugged Little Bun and slept for a while. Then she woke up and couldn't help but look at Dai in the corner. Dai had curled up his slender body into a very small ball, which didn't take up much space. It was as if he was afraid that Shao Qing would kick him out again. Shao Qing's heart softened and she wanted to call Dai to the bed. In the end, she steeled her heart and turned over to continue sleeping. However, she couldn't sleep well as she kept thinking about Dai's pitiful appearance. After a while, she woke up again. When she turned over, she realized that Dai didn't seem to be in his original position. He moved forward a little. Although he didn't move much forward, he definitely moved a little. Shao Qing closed her eyes and pretended that she was asleep. After a while, she squinted her eyes and saw Dai moving forward sneakily. He moved and moved until he was very close to the bed. Although he moved closer, Dai didn't dare to get into the bed. He just wanted to get closer to Shao Qing so that he could look at Shao Qing up close. Looking at Dai's pitiful appearance and even more pitiful eyes, Shao Qing sighed. As soon as she spoke, Dai was startled. He quickly returned to his original position and lowered his head, pretending to be asleep. Shao Qing was amused by him. She moved inside and made room for him. Then she said to him, "Get into the bed and sleep, but don't move around. Don't disturb the baby. You have to sleep well." Dai was already hugging his head and prepared to be kicked out. When he heard Shao Qing's words, he was so happy that he almost jumped up. Without another word, he took off his coat and crawled into the bed. Dai was worried that Shao Qing would go back on her words, so he was very obedient once he got into the bed. He took up a small space and continued to curl up into a ball. When Shao Qing and Dai slept in the same bed, if a normal person came in, they would probably rather sleep on the floor outside than sleep in the bed within 10 minutes. Because the bed was too cold, none of the three of them had a normal temperature. When she touched them, they were all cold as if they had just been taken out of the freezer. Even though there wasn't much warmth, Dai especially liked to lean on Shao Qing when he fell asleep. Before he fell asleep, he remembered that he had to curl up into a ball and try not to take up any space. After he fell asleep, he began to unscrupulously stretch his body. The next morning, the three of them were like this. Shao Qing was hugging Little Bun, Dai was hugging Shao Qing's waist, and one of his legs was pressing down on Shao Qing's leg. After Shao Qing woke up, she mercilessly kicked Dai out of the bed. Dai didn't know what happened, but he was already outside the tent. His chin hit the ground first, and his face was blank. Therefore, when people passed by Shao Qing's tent, they all saw Dai lying on the ground like a poor boy who was chased out of the house by his wife. The poor boy didn't feel that he was pitiful, so he happily went back into the tent again. He helped Shao Qing pass socks, Shao Qing's shoes, and Shao Qing's coat. He was very attentive. Shao Qing wasn't angry with him. She just found him interesting, so she kept a straight face. Dai didn't know. He thought that Shao Qing was angry, so he kept looking at Shao Qing pitifully, racking his brains to please his wife, he thought. He was afraid that Shao Qing wouldn't let him into the bed at night. "Captain Shao, you're up early." Yan Pingshan smiled and greeted him. "Have you eaten?" He deliberately emphasized the three words, Captain Shao. When ordinary people heard this title, they would definitely be polite. For example, they would say, "Don't call me Captain X, just call me XX. Chapter 88. That way, Yan Pingshan could logically address Shao Qing as Shao Qing, Qing Qing, and so on. It was a more intimate form of address, and he would be able to close the distance between them. It was simply perfect. However, Shao Qing had no intention of correcting him at all. She said lightly, "Team Leader Yan, you're early too." "I just woke up. Is something the matter?" Yan Pingshan's heart was about to break down. He had just realized a very serious problem. Shao Qing's brain was wired differently from a normal person's. Therefore, he had been using a normal way of thinking to communicate with Shao Qing. As a result, their relationship was getting further and further apart. Just like this time, Shao Qing had at least called him by his name previously. Now, she had directly addressed him as team leader. He had originally wanted to close the distance between them, but in the end, he had unknowingly pushed the distance away. "Nothing much. If there's nothing else, I'll go wash up first." Shao Qing smiled slightly. Her entire face revealed the message, "Since there's nothing else, hurry up and leave. Don't stay here and get in my way, okay?" Yan Pingshan was especially aggrieved. He was so aggrieved that he wanted to cry. In the end, he decided to go back and organize his thoughts before fighting again. After Yan Pingshan left, Shao Qing yawned, brushed her teeth, and washed her face. Dai and Little Bun had also been trained by Shao Qing to have the habit of brushing their teeth no matter when and where, even if they were about to go out to fight. The three of them each had a freshly opened toothbrush. Shao Qing had specially chosen a parent-child set. The one in her hand was for her mother, the one in Little Bun's hand was for the baby, and Dai's was for her father. Even his toothpaste cup was adorable. Little Bun was especially amusing when he was brushing his teeth. He always liked to brush and brush. After brushing for a while, he would take a mouthful of water and rinse his mouth with gurgling sounds. He looked like a little squirrel with a mouth full of pine nuts. Dai followed suit. The two squirrels, one big and one small, played very happily. When Shao Qing finished rinsing her mouth, the two squirrels were still purring. Then, Dai was slapped on the back by Shao Qing. He spat out saliva onto Meng Shen's pants. Meng Shen, who was completely passing by and innocently implicated, was speechless. Shao Qing was a little embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't see you coming. Would you like me to take it off and wash it for you?" Meng Shen saw that the key part of his pants was already wet, and the traces of wetness were still spreading. He was actually having a mental breakdown. He just wanted to get close to her and see if he could get any information related to the water purification. Then he ended up like this. People who didn't know better would think that he had wet his pants. Meng Shen was about to refuse. It was just his pants that were wet. It was too bad of him to let Shao Qing wash it. Just as he was about to refuse, he suddenly thought that this was also a way to get closer to Xiao Qing. He could take the opportunity to chat with her and become familiar with her. Hence, he said, I don't know how to wash clothes. It's really troublesome. It's not troublesome. Xiao Qing thought for a while and said, It will be too troublesome to change your clothes and send them back. I have air dyes clothes in my tent. They are new. I brought them from home. Both of you are about the same height, so you should be able to wear them. Okay. Meng Shen considered that he couldn't parade around with his pants wet, so he agreed. He was about the same height as Air Dai, but Air Dai was thinner. Hence, Meng Shen looked tighter when he wore Air Dai's clothes. I will send them to you when they are dry. Xiao Qing pinched Little Bun's cheeks to make him spit out the water. Then, she took a tissue and wiped Little Bun's mouth. Chapter 89. Well, I actually came here to ask you if you are interested in settling down in Zhongbei Survivor Base. Zhongbei Survivor Base may not have as good benefits as S-City Survivor Base, and the climate there is also worse than S-City Survivor Base, but... Meng Shen hesitated for a long time and found that he could not find an attractive reason. In the end, he could only say dryly, but I still hope that you can take your team and stay in our Zhongbei Survivor Base. The corner of Xiao Qing's eyes twitched. She had never seen someone persuade others like this. He pointed out the shortcomings of his own base, and in the end, he said dryly, Do you want to come or not? Who would go there? Moreover, Xiao Qing's savings were all in S-City Survivor Base. Just the food she had saved during these days of missions was enough to make her reluctant to leave. If it was not to the point where she had to move, Xiao Qing would not be ready to leave S-City Survivor Base. Meng Shen also knew that his words were particularly unpersuasive, but he still couldn't help but say, When we arrive at Zhongbei Survivor Base, I will take you around. The people in our base are very nice. Maybe you will like it. He now felt that he was very useless. When he was with Yen Pingshan, he could make Yen Pingshan unable to say a word. When it came to Xiao Qing, he was so useless. Maybe he really should treat his social difficulties. Although Yen Pingshan always said that he couldn't control himself in front of beauty, he still felt that it was really necessary. Maybe. Xiao Qing was too embarrassed to refuse directly. She said euphemistically, We are going to have breakfast. Have you eaten? Do you want to join us? Meng Shen shook his head. I have eaten. I will go back first. You guys eat. After Meng Shen left, Xiao Qing poured a glass of water for Xiao Bao to rinse his mouth. Air Dai was very dissatisfied with Xiao Qing's different treatment. He pouted and showed the circle of foam around his mouth to Xiao Qing, trying to let Xiao Qing wipe it for him. Then Xiao Qing slapped a piece of tissue on his face. Air Dai was speechless. After breakfast, they packed up their tents and other things and continued their journey. According to Yen Pingshan, the way back was much smoother than when they came. At this speed, they would be able to return to the Zhongbei Survivor Base in less than 10 days. Xiao Qing was not as optimistic as him. She looked at the map. The terrain of this area was not flat. There were mountains and hills. After this section of the road, they would arrive at a densely populated area. There would definitely be a lot of zombies. In the wild, they would face many unknown dangers. Otherwise, when Meng Shan and the others came, there would not be so many injured people. So now was not the time to relax. When she was in the S-City Survivor Base, she saw with her own eyes that a group of paranormals was ambushed by a group of ordinary zombies led by a high-level zombie very close to the base. People were like that. When they were at home, they were often the most relaxed. They were very close to the base, so they let their guard down. In the end, they were all wiped out. Naturally, the result was very miserable. After being bitten, paranormals would not become zombies. What awaited them was only to be slowly eaten. This was also a kind of fairness from God. After ordinary people were bitten, they would become zombies. Once paranormals were surrounded by zombies, they would either commit suicide or be eaten. According to this idea, Maybe humans turning into zombies was another kind of evolution. Just like how humans evolved into paranormals, God couldn't be too unfair to ordinary people. Therefore, zombies were also evolving, and in the end, they might be the pinnacle of a species. Chapter 90. Shao Qing didn't want to remind them. After all, Yan Pingshan and the others must be the elites of a base. If they couldn't even maintain the most basic vigilance, they wouldn't be qualified to be elites and represent a base to do business with another base. After passing through the mountain pass, we will be very close to the town. When we get there, we can enter the town and search. Many rural farmers will grow vegetables in their own homes. Maybe we can find something. Yan Pingshan's off-road vehicle and Shao Qing's car were moving forward. He chatted with Shao Qing for a while. If it was a small team of paranormals carrying enough rations, they wouldn't risk entering a town. But Yan Pingshan's team had a lot of people, so they didn't care about a small town. Shao Qing didn't say anything. She just frowned and looked at the mountain pass in front of them. There was a road here, but it was built by the villagers. It divided the small mountain from the middle. The road was also ordinary cement road. Because it had been in disrepair for a long time, there were cracks everywhere. Fortunately, their off-road vehicle's performance was good. Climbing mountains was not a problem, not to mention such a road. Shao Qing felt that something was wrong. In the middle of the broken road in front of them, there was a pile of straw and other things, lying flat on the ground. Moreover, there was a long stretch of the ground covered with wheat stalks. It was as if before doomsday, someone had left the wheat stalks on the ground and no one had taken them away. Speed up a little bit. Yan Pingshan shouted and looked at his watch. Before he could tell Shao Qing the time, the first car fell with the wheat stalks. The car behind didn't stop in time and also fell in. It turned out that under the wheat stalks, there was a very deep pit. It was at least 10 meters deep. Ordinary cars that fell in would never be able to climb out. The third car braked and almost rear-ended it. Because everything happened too quickly, they weren't prepared at all. Everyone be careful. Yan Pingshan's face was very ugly. This big pit was dug by man. It was absolutely not natural. Didn't they see that someone had covered it with wheat stalks? But he didn't think about it. As a result, he was careless and almost lost 2 cars. The car leading the way belonged to the blazing team. Yen Ruru was also very angry. She sent people to rescue the people in the car while being vigilant. No one would dig such a pit for no reason. It must be premeditated. Everyone, please be careful. Yan Pingshan also sent people to rescue people. They were very vigilant, but they didn't know that some people were also very hesitant. This pit was dug by the survivors in the town ahead. Some of the survivors in their town went to the small survivor base nearby. Some of the more capable and brave ones went to the survivor base in S City. The rest of the group who didn't want to be controlled stayed here. There were about 30 people in the group, and 80% of them were paranormals. Because this road led to the Jiangbei survivor base, and it was the safest one, they had set up a trap there, specifically to trap passing vehicles. When Yan Pingshan and the others came, they took another road, so they didn't meet them. When they went back, they chose a safer road. As a result, they met them. This group of people were like bandits. Every day, a few people took turns to watch the big pit below. Once someone fell into the trap, they would call their companions to go down and pick up the meat. This group of people was cruel and merciless. Their principle was to kill the men and leave the women alive. They cut the weeds and the roots to prevent future troubles. Often, when people fell into the trap, the men were made into jerky and stored as food, and the women were raped and kept in captivity to play with. This group of people was also very smart. If they encountered a large number of paranormals, they wouldn't come out and let the other party leave. So until now, they had been very safe in this area. But this time, they met Yan Pingshan's team. There were nearly 30 people in Yan Pingshan's team. Even if only half of them were paranormals, they were still a tough stubble. Generally, in this kind of situation, they wouldn't come out. They would wait for Yen Pingshan and the others to leave, then they would set up the trap again and wait for the next prey. However, it was different this time. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that the carriages in the middle were filled with goods. Although they were covered with tarpaulins and couldn't see what the goods were, there were only two kinds of things that required so many carriages to transport. The first was food, and the second was fuel. It could also be all kinds of materials. In short, they were what they needed. If they did this, they wouldn't have to worry about food for the next 1 or 2 years. It was really a great temptation. But the number of people made them hesitate. The person in charge of the patrol gritted his teeth and said to his companion, "They can't move the cars out of the pit in a short time. You go and inform our boss that there is a big fat sheep coming. There are nearly 30 people, and the number of paranormals is unknown. They are transporting about 10 cars full of supplies. Ask our boss if he wants to do it." The companion nodded and went quietly. Their camp was nearby, built around the town. It didn't take much time for them to go back and forth, not to mention that he was a speed paranormal. He found the leader who was still on the woman's belly and said breathlessly at the door, "Boss, we met a fat sheep. This time, it's really a fat sheep. Should we do it?" A woman's shoe flew out and hit him in the face. "Get the hell out of here. You almost scared me." If you have something to say it quickly. If you can't say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I will cut off your leg and pickle it. Chapter 91. This piece of fat meat was really too big. After listening to the subordinate, the leader pulled up his pants and gathered all his subordinates to go over. When they arrived, they saw that there were indeed 10 full cars. The ruts along the way were so deep, which meant that there must be a lot of things in the cars, and they were very heavy. There was a 50% chance that it was food, and a 50% chance that it was oil. The leader couldn't hold it in anymore. He gritted his teeth and asked, "Where's the second brother?" A skinny man with blue skin came over. "Big brother, I'm here. We're in the upper hand now. Do you have the confidence to take down half of them without being discovered?" The leader said gloomily, "I can try." The second brother calculated for a moment, then said, "As long as there's no wood-type healer among them, it won't be a problem to take down half of them." There were generally 2 types of wood-type paranormals. One was healing and assisting. That was to say, when such paranormals subdued their own plants, they would try their best to choose those that could heal and enhance their teammates. Of course, they would have the basic ability to protect themselves. The second type was controlling and assisting. For example, Shao Qing's vines and some wood-type paranormals plants could release some toxins to weaken the enemy. This type of paranormals was mainly controlling. Shao Qing was a controlling and assisting assault-type paranormals. Usually, she could also assist her teammates. At a critical moment, she could become an assault-type paranormals in a second, controlling and assisting herself. Hearing this, the leader made up his mind. Gather. Take down this fat sheep. Everyone will get an extra bag of food. When we go back tonight, we can play with all the women at home." Although they didn't dare to cheer for fear of being discovered by Shao Qing and the others, everyone's face was full of excitement. Usually, they didn't have the chance to play with women. After all, there were very few women, and they usually didn't get a chance to play with them. Therefore, everyone had been in love with their left and right hands for a long time. Now, they were all staring at Shao Qing and the others with shining eyes. The second brother smiled wretchedly while pointing at Shao Qing and Yen Ruru. "Big brother, don't hurt those 2 beauties. Let's have a threesome tonight." The leader waved his hand and said, "If you can take them all down, I'll let you have a taste tonight." All second rubbed his hands and walked towards the wind tunnel. When he reached the wind tunnel, he smiled coldly and activated his ability. His ability was poison. When he first awakened it, it was mainly used to paralyze people. When he reached level 2, he had an additional type of poison that could paralyze people. Usually, when he encountered a large number of fat sheep, he would release the poison first. When those people were either paralyzed or unconscious, the others would rush forward and tie them up. Therefore, the leader valued him very much and gave him a lot of zombie crystal nuclei, hoping that he could reach level 3 as soon as possible. After all, when he was at level 2, he could only poison people who were above level 2. For paranormals who were above level 2, the effect of his poison was very small. If Oath 2 could reach level 3, with his special ability, he would be invincible. The colorless poison, with a faint fragrance, blended into the wind and slowly drifted to Shao Qing and the others. Yen Pingshan and Yen Ruru had just rescued people from the car and were commanding several strength-based paranormals to drag the car out. Shao Qing smelled a faint fragrance. Since her sense of taste and pain had been reduced to a very low level, her sense of smell and hearing had become particularly sensitive. More importantly, when she smelled that fragrance, the wood energy automatically circulated in her body, as if it was cleaning something. Chapter 92. At that moment, Shao Qing understood. She hurriedly called out to the others, "Hold your breath. There's poison in the wind." Shao Qing's words were timely, but some people were still poisoned. Those who were poisoned were all second-level paranormals and below. People like Yen Ruru only felt a little dizzy at most, because the poison couldn't enter her body at all. Even if some poison entered her body, it would be quickly removed by Yen Ruru's energy. Another example was Xiao Tong. She had the habit of setting up a simple spirit shield around her at all times, so the poison would be removed as soon as it touched the shield. It couldn't hurt Xiao Tong at all. Moreover, some paranormals who were at the peak of second level and not far from third level were also not affected. They could be removed in a short while. However, those who were hiding in the dark didn't know that. They only saw a large number of people fall down. The leader suddenly became excited, as if the fat sheep had already entered his pocket. "Brothers, let's go. Capture the women alive, and don't leave the men alive." A group of people rushed down. Yen Ruru was very calm. She ordered the rest of the people to move the poisoned ones back. If they were accidentally hurt during the fight, they would have nowhere to cry. Shao Qing also saw Yen Ruru's thoughts. She stepped forward and asked, "Who are you?" "Little girl, is there something wrong with your brain?" "I'm your husband." The leader laughed lewdly and said, "Didn't we sleep together last night? You don't recognize me now after putting on your pants?" Shao Qing's eyes immediately became cold. Air Dai was about to rush out and attack, but he was stopped by Shao Qing. Shao Qing smiled faintly. "What did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly." "I said I'm your husband, and I also like the little girl behind you. How about you serve me tonight? She's so young." "Second brother, don't you think they look like mother and son?" How could the leader be afraid of Shao Qing? There were only 10 people on her side, but they had nearly 30 people on their side, and all of them were paranormals. Second brother immediately chimed in, "To be able to F***CK a mother and daughter, boss, your luck with women isn't shallow. How about you let me have the hot chick next to you?" "No problem, we brothers should share our blessings." The leader laughed. Shao Qing looked at Yen Ruru, and then looked at the captain of Meng Shin's team. Although she was asking, her tone was very cold. "How about leaving the two of them to me?" Yen Ruru's weapon was a whip. It was made of the spine of a mutated tiger and had been specially processed. She didn't ask Shao Qing if she could use it. She just said, "Lend me that ice element guy over there. I'll get rid of all the troublesome minions for you." The other captain also nodded. "Do what you can. Be careful. If you can't do it, call us for help." Hearing this, the leader laughed and immediately waved his hand. "Brothers, they look down on us. Come on, let's fight together. Let's end this quickly. Kill all the men and bring the women back so that everyone can have some fun." Those who were temporarily paralyzed were dragged to the back. Without any consideration, no one would talk nonsense with them. Shao Qing let Yen Hanqing and the others choose to kill those who were not pleasing to the eye, while she faced the leader and second brother. Xiao Qing's eyes were filled with killing intent that was about to explode. She stretched out her hand, and green vines shot towards the two men. The second brother's first reaction was to hide behind the leader and release the poison. His poison was too disgusting. Although it wouldn't harm people's lives, it made people unable to move freely. The leader hurriedly used his power. His power was the same as Yen Ruru's, which was fire. The difference was that he was a little weaker than Yen Ruru. Chapter 93. As soon as the flames touched the vines, black smoke floated up. The poison on the surface of the vines was evaporated by the flames. When the leader saw the black smoke, he was shocked. He hurriedly formed a fire shield in front of him, but the vines with black smoke went around him. Then, a scream came from behind him. When the leader turned around, his face was splashed with blood. Those vines were like sharp cones, easily piercing the second brother's body. Some pierced his stomach, some pierced his chest, and some pierced his neck. Then, in the next second, the second brother's body was torn apart by the waving vines. Only his head was intact. It rolled around on the ground, then stopped moving toward the leader. The second brother's face was still a bit lustful. Until he died, he didn't realize how he died. He was still immersed in the illusion of victory. His limbs, flesh, and internal organs were scattered everywhere along with his body. The leader wiped his face and his hand was stained with blood and minced meat. There was also a piece of internal organ that he couldn't tell which organ it was. The warm blood splashed into his eyes and mouth. In an instant, he realized that this time, he seemed to have provoked someone he shouldn't have. Especially when he saw Yen Ru and the others slaughtering his subordinates one-sidedly even though they had fewer people, the leader wanted to run away at that moment. After all, his brothers had lost everything, and his subordinates had lost everything. He could still find another one, and there was still a chance for him to make a comeback. After all, he was already a level 3 paranormal, but what if he died? If he died, he would have nothing left. But would Xiao Qing let him run away? Seeing him release a fire shield to stop the vines from getting closer and sneakily look around to escape, Xiao Qing sneered. Little Tong. Xiao Tong immediately released her power. When Xiao Tong was a level 1 paranormal, she could only release a shield to protect herself and her companions. This was probably because she had been beaten and scolded since she was young, which caused her to have an extreme desire for a sense of security. That was why this ability appeared when she awakened. When she reached level 2, Xiao Tong's biggest desire was to help Xiao Qing instead of feeling safe. Thus, she gained a second ability, which also gave her the ability to attack. The invisible spiritual power hit the leader's head in an instant. When Xiao Tong was a little stronger, she could even use this ability to blow up other people's heads invisibly. Unfortunately, she was still a little weak now. All she could do was make the leader feel a sharp pain in his head and temporarily lose his consciousness. That was enough. In an instant, the dense fire shields around the leader dissipated along with his spirit. The vines took advantage of this opportunity to invade. Although the leader had already woken up at this time, it was already too late. The vines had already wrapped around his neck and limbs. The leader hurriedly released flames to burn the vines, but the paralyzing and corrosive poison had already entered his body through the thorns on the vines. As the poison spread, the flames became weaker and weaker. The vines also slowly tightened, strangling him to the point that his tongue was about to be stuck out. Let me go. I know I was wrong. The leader rolled his eyes as he was strangled. He said intermittently, I saved a lot of food, and money, and crystal nuclei. I'll give them all to you. I'll tell you where those things are. Don't kill me. Yen Pingshan also walked over. Ah Qing, let him live first. Then Yen Pingshan saw the vines suddenly tighten, and the thorns instantly lengthened, piercing into the leader's neck. Even though he was so far away, Yen Pingshan could hear the sound of bones breaking. Chapter 94. The first thing that fell was the leader's arm, followed by his legs, and finally his head. In an instant, only his body was left hanging in the air by the vines. Shao Qing turned around and smiled embarrassedly. "You were a little slow, so I was a little faster." "I'm sorry." Yan Pingshan silently swallowed his next words and said flatteringly, "Good job." He just wanted to ask if there was a place to grow crops in the town. Shao Qing was too cruel. Fortunately, there were still many small fries left, so he could ask them one by one. "Your leaders are all dead. Surrender." Yen Ruru waved her long whip, which was covered with a layer of dark flame. Whoever it landed on would have their skin and flesh burnt and their bones broken. Those small fries were about to surrender, but Shao Qing shouted, "Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive." Yen Ruru looked at Shao Qing doubtfully. After all, it was a little cruel to kill them all. After all, although the leader was very bad, some of his subordinates might have been coerced. Shao Qing smiled coldly and said, "Ask them. Which one of them hasn't eaten human flesh? Which one of them hasn't killed? Didn't you hear that sentence? Kill all the men and capture all the women alive. They have already harmed so many people. Even if they were unwilling at the beginning, now. I'm afraid they like this kind of life more than anyone else. They only need to plunder and kill to live a good life." Yen Ruru also reacted and waved her hand. "Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive." Perhaps Shao Qing's method of dealing with them was very rough, but she was right. These people had long fallen. Even if they were let go, they would still find another place to continue robbing. After tasting the pleasure of reaping without sowing, they could not change. Instead of letting them continue to harm others, it was better to kill them all and take it as a good thing. Soon, those small fries were almost all killed, leaving only one who looked a little younger. Yen Ru kicked him and said, "Lead the way for us later. We'll go to your lair, understand?" I know," the young man with multicolored hair said in a trembling voice. At this time, those paranormals who had been temporarily paralyzed had not recovered, because Shao Qing and the others had ended the battle too quickly. Yen Ruru led her people to clean up the battlefield. The big pit dug by the robbers was very useful. After all the corpses were dug out, they were thrown into the big pit. Finally, the Earth Paranormals worked together to fill up the big pit. When they buried the corpses, they cried. The leader's body was fine. Although his body was torn apart, it was still whole. But the second leader's body was pitiful. Except for his head, even his internal organs were broken into pieces. The cleaners had no choice but to find a shovel and shovel them into the pit. While they were cleaning up, the young captive asked softly, "Aren't you going to leave the corpses behind? It's a pity to bury so much meat." Yen Ruru patted Shao Qing on the shoulder. "You're right. Now I even feel that it's too merciful to just kill them. When we get to their nest later, I'm sure you can't wait to dig them all out and cut them into pieces," Shao Qing said expressionlessly. After cleaning up, except for the mottled blood on the ground, there was nothing else to prove that a big battle had just taken place here. At this time, those paranormals gradually recovered. Shao Qing and the others got in the car and went to their nest under the guidance of the young captive. Chapter 95. After passing the mountain pass, they would arrive at the town not far away. Their base was located between the town and the mountain. They had built their base well, surrounded by thick wooden fences. Inside the base should be the houses on the edge of the town, which had been occupied by them. When the off-road vehicles stopped outside, some people who stayed behind secretly looked out. Yen Ruru escorted the young captive out of the vehicle, followed by a large number of people. Those who stayed behind were immediately frightened. "Break in." Shao Qing was the first to make a move. Vines flew out in an instant and tore apart the guardrails on both sides. Gu Pan Pan took the lead and slammed into the guardrails with her body. The iron gate flew out along with half of the guardrails. Shao Qing led the group of paranormals behind her and rushed in, knocking down the few paranormals who stayed behind at the gate in minutes. I'll bring some people over to take a look and ransack their warehouse. Yen Pingshan rubbed his palms and was very happy. Shao Qing and Yen Ruru took some people to search for survivors. Fortunately, this small stronghold was not big, so the search was very fast. Several paranormals who hid in the stronghold were soon found, along with a group of women. It was a group of women with abnormal mental states. They were all dressed in rags and skinny. 6 or 7 out of 10 of them had lifeless eyes. Some of them even began to take off their clothes when they saw that someone was coming. Their bodies were covered with scars of all kinds. It was a ghastly sight. Some of the women's bodies had been ravaged to the point that it was unbearable to look at. Yen Ruru suddenly understood why Shao Qing had told her that once they reached this place, she would not be able to resist pulling out the corpses from the pit and shredding them into pieces. Because she really wanted to do that now. In the post-apocalyptic world, women were originally a vulnerable group, not to mention encountering such a group of beasts. Yen Ruru turned her head away, tears coming out. She was actually a very emotional woman. Seeing them in such a miserable state, she was about to go crazy from anger. She was almost unable to bear it. The group of male paranormals consciously went out, leaving Shao Qing and the other women to dress these women. Not all of the women were crazy. Some of them were still sane. One of the women asked tentatively, "Were you also captured?" Shao Qing shook her head. "You are free now. We have killed all the bandits here. No one will force you anymore." All of a sudden, those women seemed to have gone crazy as they pounced on a woman in the corner. That woman was wearing a very beautiful dress. The hem of her dress had traces of being deliberately torn and smeared with dirt. The woman screamed, "What are you doing?" She was pinned down in the middle by a group of crazy women, and screams immediately rang out. These women were all ordinary people, and they only knew how to scratch and bite. However, each of them wanted to eat her up, and they viciously tore off piece after piece of meat. Soon the ground was covered with blood, and so were their bodies. They really looked like a group of lunatics. That woman was bitten to death. When she died, there was no intact part of her body. The woman who spoke first wiped the blood from her mouth and spat, "We were all captured and humiliated, but this woman clung onto that bastard and helped him torture us. Several of our sisters were tortured to death just like that. Among them were 2 children, one 13 years old and the other 16 years old. I'd like to see what color her heart is. No matter what happened, it's over now. Don't be sad." Yen Ruru didn't know how to comfort them. She just wiped her tears and said, "Anyway, you are free now." The woman's eyes lit up, and then dimmed. She held her legs and began to cry. Her crying infected the other women, and soon they all cried together. Shao Qing waited patiently for them to stop crying. When they slowly sobbed, she said softly, "There is a Zhongbei survivor base in front of us, and there is a survivor base in S City behind us. There are also some small bases nearby, but they are not as safe as the big ones. You can consider where to settle down." Chapter 96. The few sensible girls looked at each other, but no one said anything in the end. No matter which base they went to, they had to walk a long way. Besides, they were a group of girls, so it was not safe for them to go anywhere. There was no guarantee in a small base. It was inevitable that some people would see them as girls and do something bad to them, or even imprison them. How much better would that situation be than now? If they went to a big base, it would be much safer. However, they were all weak girls, ordinary people, and some of them were not sane. It was such a long way to go to a big base. How many of them could reach there alive? Women who could live until now without going crazy were all very smart and had high endurance. Regarding the above conclusion, everyone was very clear, but no one said anything. Because they all knew that no one had any obligation to take a group of useless women with them. In particular, there were several girls who had already gone crazy. They would only be a burden. Smart people would not choose to take them with them. Yen Ruru looked at Shao Qing with some embarrassment. She also knew this, so even if she sympathized with these women, she did not say that she would take them with her. If they were near S City base, and there were only her own team of paranormals, she would dare to say that. However, she was now on a mission. Yen Pingshan was her employer, and she was just a mercenary. Therefore, she could not make this decision. Xiao Qing did not say anything. She was silent for a long time, and then said to Yen Ruru, "Take them out and find Yen Pingshan." This kind of hot potato was better left to Yen Pingshan. After all, Yen Pingshan was the employer, so it was better to let him make the decision. Yen Ruru nodded and breathed a sigh of relief. She put on the girls' clothes and took them out. Yen Pingshan had found the warehouse and was directing people to move things out. There were several captives tied up together beside him. Although a lot of things were moved out, there was no happy expression on his face. Xiao Qing walked over and found that most of the things in the warehouse were corpses. The corpses had been cleaned clean, their internal organs had been removed, and their heads had been cut off. After soaking them in salt water, they were split in half from the middle and hung on hooks like slaughtered pigs and dogs. There were at least 50 to 60 corpses hanging in the left and right rows. Some of them were tall and seemed to be adult men. Some of them were short and were probably underage. It was no wonder that Yen Pingshan's expression was so ugly. Anyone who saw such a tragedy would have an ugly expression. When the women saw the captives beside Yen Pingshan, they clenched their teeth and wanted to pounce on them. But since Xiao Qing and the others didn't say anything, they didn't dare to do anything rashly. However, a woman who looked to be in her 30s and had a great figure pounced on them. Her hair was disheveled. After pouncing on them, she bit one of them on the throat. Everyone heard a clear scream and the sound of blood pouring down her throat. Gulp, gulp. The other woman hurriedly said, "Please don't be angry." Her sister was still pregnant when she was raped by this man. After that, the man even cut out the child in her dead sister's belly just to see the gender. Then, he fed the child to wild dogs. From that day on, she went crazy. Xiao Qing wasn't angry at all. She used vines to pull the captives who were still alive out one by one and asked the women, "Live or die?" The captives kept begging for mercy and repenting, but the women were very determined. This kind of beast, it's too easy for them to die. Chapter 97. Xiao Qing dismembered the captives one by one in front of these women, but no one thought that she was cruel. After seeing everything in this stronghold, everyone felt that they could not atone for their sins even if they died 10,000 times. After moving out the supplies and burying the pickled corpses, Yen Pingshan said fiercely, "I must burn this place to vent my hatred. Let's deal with them first." Xiao Qing briefly explained the origin of these women, and then threw the most important question to Yen Pingshan. "Now they have nowhere to go. You are the employer. What do you think we should do?" Yen Pingshan stared and was a little confused. Xiao Qing really gave him a difficult problem. No matter how he dealt with these women, there would be problems. If he left them to their own devices, he would not be able to live with his conscience. If he brought them along, the danger along the way would be a lot greater. Moreover, if they really encountered an accident, these women would only be a burden. Meng Shen said, "I suggest that we bring them along. What do you think of the two captains? Although we are the employer, your opinions are also very important." "I have no opinion," Yen Ruru hurriedly said. Xiao Qing glanced at the women and changed her view of Meng Shen. She said lightly, "If we bring you along, you will be responsible for cooking and cleaning. You don't have any opinion, right?" The women were very surprised and nodded. How could they have any opinion? They were even very grateful to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing made them feel that they were still somewhat useful. "Then let's bring them. Anyway, there are only 6 women. Sister Yen can bring 3, and I can bring 3. Xiao Qing said calmly, "Have you moved everything out? If you have, let's go." "Okay." Yen Pingshan also nodded, and the group of people left. Before leaving, Yen Ruru set a fire. They only left after seeing this evil place turn into ashes with their own eyes. The women secretly wiped away their tears. They had suffered too much in this place. They had lost all their loved ones and in the end, they had nothing left. Xiao Qing found some clothes in her space and asked them to change out of the shabby clothes that couldn't cover their bodies. Xiao Tong also took some medicine for treating wounds. When she heard Xiao Tong's thanks, she blushed. After taking in these women, they entered the town. It was said that these women were usually asked to go to the town's vegetable garden with a few ordinary people, so they were very familiar with the way to the vegetable garden. Yan Pingshan and his men picked all the vegetables that had grown. Although they had harvested a lot and could have a fresh lunch in a while, no one felt happy. Everything that they had seen today was too heavy for them to be happy. The women in the team were very nervous. They rushed to do everything, such as cooking. Xiao Qing never stopped them, because she knew that doing these things would make them feel more at ease. Leave the cooking to Han Qing. He is very good at cooking. You have been tired for a day. Take a rest. Xiao Qing ordered the vines to retract their thorns and arrange them into the shape of a bench. Sitting on the bench was exceptionally elastic, and it was cool enough not to hurt one's butt. Dai and the others sat at the side, waiting for the meal. The three women were very embarrassed and sat down after setting the table. Xiao Qing saw that they were nervous and didn't say anything. They couldn't relax for a while. Auntie, some candy. Little Baozi walked with his short legs and distributed the candy to the women. He blinked his big eyes and was so cute. The three women were at a loss as to what to do as they held the candy. One of them was the woman who had pounced on the captive and bitten his throat. She had been so fierce before, and her eyes were bloodshot. She had bitten a captive's throat in a frenzy, but now she was like a child. She was at a loss as to what to do as she held the candy. In the end, she gently patted Little Bun's head. Chapter 98. Her movements were very gentle and careful. It was as if she would hurt the little bun if she used too much force. Another woman who was sane couldn't help but ask, "Is this your child? He's so cute. You don't have to call me yours. Just call me by my name. My name is Xiao Qing." Xiao Qing whispered, "This is my son." "What's his name?" The woman was a little embarrassed. "He's really cute. I like him very much. My name is Xiang Ru. This is Zhang Xiaofen. This is Tao Jingjing." Xiao Qing was stunned. She just realized that she had been calling the little bun, baby, all the time. She hadn't given the little bun a name yet. Naming was a big deal. It needed to be carefully considered and pondered. Of course, for a person who was bad at naming, naming was as painful as fighting a level 4 zombie alone. Actually, I haven't given him a name yet. Xiao Qing couldn't bring herself to say it. Finally, she said vaguely, "His nickname is Bao Bao. You can call him Bao Bao." "Bao Bao?" Xiang Ru asked carefully, "Can I kiss him?" Before Xiao Qing said anything, the little bun took the initiative and kissed Xiang Ru. Xiang Ru held her face and was very happy. Xiao Qing couldn't help but smile. She picked up the little bun and turned her face to the little bun. The little bun came over and kissed her a few times. Xiang Ru sat on the side and was very envious. After a while, she smiled and said, "It's so happy to have such a little baby by your side." "Okay." Xiao Qing's eyes were full of tenderness. The little bun was her biggest motivation. Normally, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. With limited ingredients, what Yan Hanqing could cook was also limited. Now that he had an abundance of ingredients, he made 6 dishes and a soup in one go. Although they were all vegetarian dishes, they looked, smelled, and looked appetizing. A group of people gathered around to eat, which made Yan Pingshan and the others drool. After all, there was a gap between chefs. The gap between their chefs and Yan Hanqing was like the gap between a beginner who had learned how to cook and a person who had learned how to cook through the system. If there was a comparison, there would be harm. The women didn't dare to fill the bowl with rice. Xiao Qing filled the bowl with rice and handed it to them. She also put some food into their bowls. There are a lot of dishes. Help yourselves. Only when you are full will you have the strength to clean up the dishes. She had eaten very little, and she had forced herself to eat. She would have to spit it out later. If it weren't for the fact that she wanted to fool others, she wouldn't have eaten a single bite. After lunch, they didn't continue to move forward. Instead, they stayed in the town to rest temporarily. At least the town had been cleaned up, and there were few zombies. They found a 3-story building along the street and could have a good rest for the day. After all, it was not only their bodies that were tired, but also their minds that were on high alert. If they could rest, it would be good for the rest of the journey. Xiao Qing went back to her room after lunch. Then, Xiao Qing and Dai surrounded the trash can and vomited for a while. After vomiting, they took Little Bun and began to absorb a pile of crystal stones. Little Bun could absorb some high-calorie and nutritious things, but they couldn't eat raw food, let alone flesh and blood. They could only use crystal stones to maintain their strength. They spent the whole day and night in their room absorbing crystal stones. They only showed their faces during lunch. The next morning, Xiao Qing didn't need much sleep, so she got up early. But when she got up, the 3 women were already packing their things. Xiao Qing couldn't help but frown and went downstairs. "It's only 5 o'clock. I'm sorry, did we wake you up?" Xiang Ru said with some panic. Xiao Qing shook her head and said to them, "What you need to do is to have a good rest, and then you will have the energy to hurry on the road. I don't need you to be too diligent, as long as you don't drag us down." Her words were not pleasant to hear, and her voice was very cold. Xiang Ru whispered, "You are a good person." Xiao Qing was stunned for a moment. No one had ever given her a good person card. Her teammates said that she was a trustworthy and dependable person, and people couldn't help but regard her as the backbone. Her enemies said that she was cruel and ruthless, and was a lone wolf. People who didn't know her said that she was cold and unapproachable. Xiang Ru was the first person to say that she was a good person. She couldn't help but turn her head. Her face was still expressionless, but her earlobes were slightly red. "How am I a good person? Haven't you seen how I kill people? You are really a good person." Xiang Ru couldn't help but raise her voice and said with some eagerness, "Although you look cold on the surface, you are more considerate than those who comfort us with warm words, and you are very hot-blooded and righteous. You are a very, very good person." Xiao Qing couldn't help but sneer. "You are so sleepy that you are hallucinating. Go to sleep, and we will be on the road in a while." Xiang Ru looked at Xiao Qing's back as she left, pulled the 2 sisters who were not very normal, and whispered, "Really? Thank you very much." Xiao Qing couldn't help but laugh. How did she act like a good person? After she killed those bandits, even the people of the Blaze team and Yen Pingshan's side would be afraid of her, right? They were really naive to think that she was a good person. She was clearly a cold-blooded, ruthless person who always thought of herself. How could she give others the illusion that she was a good person? As soon as Xiao Qing went out, she saw Meng Shen sitting at the door, wiping a dagger. His eyes were very serious, as if he was actually in a laboratory, doing the kind of experiment that couldn't go wrong. This attitude towards weapons once again pleased Xiao Qing, and made Xiao Qing's impression of Meng Shen a little better. Chapter 99. It's a Beautiful Dagger. Meng Shen was stunned for a moment. He probably didn't expect Xiao Qing to take the initiative to talk to him. He said shyly, "A very important person gave it to me." "Someone you like? Can I have a look?" Xiao Qing had an indescribable love for cold weapons. She had once bought a cabinet to store short weapons. It was filled with all kinds of military knives, bayonets, daggers, and short swords. Meng Shen hesitated for a moment, then handed the dagger to Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing held the dagger and looked at it carefully. This was a dagger used to kill people. Ordinary ornamental daggers wouldn't be sharpened. Although the daggers sold privately could be sharpened, they weren't standard. As for this single-edged dagger, although the back and hilt of the dagger were decorated with gorgeous and ancient patterns, it was easy for people to mistake it as an ornamental dagger. However, from the blade to the tip, it was prepared to kill people. Xiao Qing's favorite dagger was the double-edged plum blossom dagger. There was a crescent blade at the grip, beautiful and sharp. Most importantly, the plum blossom dagger was the most suitable weapon for women. However, the first dagger she received was a single-edged dagger. It was given to her by her instructor. At that time, she wasn't used to using bayonets, so she relied on this dagger when she went out on missions. However, during one mission, she was seriously injured and lost the dagger. No matter how Xiao Qing looked at it, she felt that the dagger looked very familiar. It looked very much like the first dagger she had thrown away. Just as she was about to take a closer look, Meng Shen whispered, "That. Have you finished looking at it?" Xiao Qing glanced at Meng Shen, who looked as if she would snatch the dagger away from him. She handed the dagger to him and asked casually, "Where did you get this dagger?" "It's pretty. Someone gave it to me." Meng Shen hesitated for a moment, then said. He took the dagger, carefully wiped it with a soft cloth, and finally put it into the scabbard. "Is that so?" Xiao Qing didn't say anything. She just faintly said, "I think this dagger looks very familiar. It seems like I've seen it a long time ago." Meng Shen's eyes immediately lit up. He quickly asked, "You've seen it? Who was using it? Can you still find her?" Xiao Qing quickly analyzed Meng Shen's words. Finally, she said tentatively, "When I saw it, the owner of this dagger was called Blue Phoenix." "Yes, that's her." Meng Shen was so surprised that his cheeks were flushed red. There was no trace of his previous indifference. "Where is she now? Can you still find her?" Xiao Qing didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked, "How do you know her? How did this dagger end up in your hands?" Meng Shen was a little hesitant. After a while, he looked like he was going to cut off all means of retreat and said, "Actually, I don't know her. I've only seen her once, and she was wearing a gas mask. At that time, I was a researcher in charge of researching drugs. We developed an effective anti-cancer drug, but before we could submit the research results, they were stolen by a spy." Thinking of the past, Meng Shen's expression became a little cold. "Because of some accident, the research institute was blown up, and I was crushed under a stone slab. It was her. Blue Phoenix saved me. She left the dagger for me to protect myself." When he finished speaking, his cold expression was instantly melted by tenderness. Xiao Qing couldn't help but shiver. At that time, the situation was urgent. Xiao Qing didn't have time to send Meng Shen out. She could only call for help. Then, she got Meng Shen's leg out from under the stone slab. After that, she found a place to put him down and chased after the spy. At that time, she left a dagger for Meng Shen. She wanted to take it back after the incident. However, she was seriously injured and laid in the hospital for 3 months. She broke 3 ribs and had a comminuted fracture in one of her legs. Other minor injuries were needless to say. After she recovered, she was discharged from the army. Chapter 100. In the end, he didn't get the dagger back. Xiao Qing wasn't going to tell Meng Shen that she was Blue Phoenix. She didn't want to bring up the past again. Looking at Meng Shen's expectant eyes, Xiao Qing originally wanted to say that Blue Phoenix was already dead. However, in the end, she couldn't help but change her words. She was injured. After recovering, her body couldn't keep up with the intensity of the mission. So, she retired from the army. I heard that she transferred to work and went home to marry and have children. Meng Shen opened his mouth, but no words came out. He lowered his head slightly, unable to hide the disappointment on his face. After a long time, he said, "I'm relieved that she's doing well. Originally, I wanted to return the dagger to her. She doesn't need it anymore." Xiao Qing stood up. "I'll go see if dinner is ready." Meng Shen nodded his head, tightly gripping the dagger. There were some things that he couldn't forget. Every night, he would dream of that white hand gently pulling him up. Even in the smoke-filled space, he could smell the faint fragrance on her body. It was very faint. He had tried to find out the people who participated in that mission several times. However, Xiao Qing was in a secret unit, so she couldn't reveal any information. The only thing Meng Shen knew was that she was called Blue Phoenix. Then, after a very long time, just when he thought he would never be able to find her again or hear any news about her, Xiao Qing told him that the person of his dreams had retired from the army and returned home to get married. In the end, it was just an illusory one-sided love. Perhaps even until her death, Blue Phoenix wouldn't know that there was someone who fell in love with her at first sight. Seeing that Xiao Qing was about to walk up the stairs, Meng Shen couldn't help but ask, "What's her real name?" Xiao Qing paused, shook her head, and went upstairs. Yan Hanqing came out of the kitchen wearing an apron. The apron was provided by Xiao Qing. It was a pink floral apron, which looked very girlish. In the beginning, Yan Hanqing was still a little embarrassed, but now he could calmly wear an apron and cook. "I've boiled fresh milk for the baby. Do you want some sugar?" Yan Hanqing asked in a low voice. Xiao Qing thought for a while and answered according to little Baozi's preference, "A spoonful of sugar. He won't be able to digest any more than that and will spit it out in the end." Yan Hanqing nodded and turned around to add more sugar. His back was very broad, and his back was as solid as a mountain, filled with a sense of security. Now, he was wearing a pink apron. It looked a little funny, but it made Xiao Qing feel warm and at ease. For someone like her, who was used to going through life and death situations and hovering on the edge of death, what she yearned for the most was warmth and a sense of security. So when Lin Qifan showered her with gentleness, she fell for him so quickly. At that time, Xiao Qing felt that she had found someone to rely on for the rest of her life. She had found a man who was willing to be her solid support. Later, she found out that there was a kind of man who wore a gentle coat and was used to sweet-talking. He threw his conscience out of the window. Xiao Qing leaned against the doorframe and sighed, "If only the person I met in the beginning was you. How good would that be?" Yan Hanqing's hand couldn't help but tremble, and he added half a spoonful of sugar. He silently stirred the milk with a spoon to prevent it from spilling out. When it was almost done, he turned off the fire and brought the pot of milk down. "I'll go wake the baby up." Xiao Qing didn't say anything else and returned to her room. Naturally, she couldn't see how gentle Yan Hanqing's gaze was when he looked at her. After waking little Baozi up and drinking the milk, Xiao Qing wiped little Baozi's milk beard clean before carrying him out for a walk. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.